Well, this does give me an extraordinary pleasure, particularly to be introduced by Tim. Tim and I go back to the age of 11 years old and then lost touch for many years, but I do appreciate the invitation. I'm also, I haven't had much of a chance to listen what's gone on here, but I did listen somewhat this afternoon and somewhat this morning, and I've been very motivated by what I've heard to make the points I would like to make. I think information science is my terminology for what I think statistics tries to be, or what a statistic should aspire to. So that term was chosen very carefully. In true style, I'll give a little outline of what I'm going to say. I want to use biostatistics as a motivator, and I want to cover the gamut of the influence that statisticians, I believe, should have, and talk about schools as well as universities, and about whether we have a sufficient supply of the right sort of statisticians. I'll put this together a little bit and suggest a few things for shaking, rattling, and rolling. Now, it was in August of 2000 that I was asked by the American Statistical Association president to give the presidential invited address at the joint statistical meetings. And I chose as my topic the opportunity for statisticians in an information-based, web-enabled world. And I think a basic point I made was statisticians should influence the world much more than they have done. It was a talk about the profession of statistics and how it might evolve in the 21st century. I also spoke about the supply and demand for statisticians, and that was partly based on my own experience and also on the kindness of the Bureau of the Census and some people in particular that gave me a lot of data that really hadn't been published. Therefore, when I was asked by Tim about a year ago or so to give an address to this eminent group, it seemed an ideal opportunity to consider whether the profession had begun to rise to the challenges of the new millennium, and also an opportunity to consider our profession in a wider geographic context. I also asked Andy Garrett, who's sitting in the front row, who works at Quintiles as a biostatistician, to help me put this together, and I appreciate Andy's strong work. Now, I believe that statistics is a fundamental professional field encompassing scientific numeracy and rigorous data analysis that it enables its practitioners to flourish in a wide variety of careers and endeavors in science, business, and government. This breadth contrasts sharply with the increasing narrowness that I see of the academic discipline of statistics. Our subject has moved from political science in the 19th century to a branch of science, I would say, in the first half of the 20th century, and to what seems to me to be a branch of mathematics more recently, at least in the way it's taught. As statistics developed during the 20th century, an elegant and rigorous mathematical theory gave a strong foundation to statistical practice. And the UK was very prolific and eminent in that development. This led to academics that taught and researched statistics to focus on mathematical derivations of important and innovative methodology, but perhaps to the detriment of the eminently skillful art of applying these methods and marketing the value to society of sound methodology in scientific, business, and political thinking. This has truly narrowed the influence and impact of our profession, and also determined, I believe, competent students with potential to become information scientists from pursuing the field. As sophisticated and powerful algorithms, together with more recently the internet, have flourished to become such enablers of the practice of statistics, one's instincts would likely have predicted the reverse trend, namely a broadening of the base of potential students and qualified practitioners of statistics, together with their influence in shaping our society's numeracy and reasoning based on the evidence of data. In contrast, degrees in business administration have gained breadth, prominence, and value. Notably, at the same time, academic programs in business administration have broadened the base of student applicants together with the experience and background of their teachers. Business degree students need to be very smart, highly motivated, and hardworking. Their talent, and indeed interest, in abstract mathematical derivations could be low or absent, but the attractiveness to business schools of broadly talented students is high. Of particular note in this illustration is the subspecialty of biostatistics. It is thriving, although could thrive even more. It also places less emphasis on mathematical rigor, which in no way is detrimental to the quality of application. Now, the following comments that I want to draw from biostatistics do draw primarily from my tenure as a professor of biostatistics at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill during the period 1971, in fact, till 1988, and also as an employer of biostatisticians over the last 25 years through Quintiles, which I founded in 1982. So there was 6 years of concurrent overlap, as encouraged by American universities. Quintiles currently employs over 1,500 biostatisticians, statistical programmers, and data management staff. And just over 1/3 of these are in the United States and the United Kingdom, and nearly 2/3 are outside both those countries. Now, Professor Gary Cook and I did found Quintiles in 1982 as an outgrowth of the substantial biostatistical consulting that we did at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill with the pharmaceutical industry during the 70s and the 80s. And initially, Quintiles was a biostatistics and data management company for pharmaceutical clinical trials. Today, we've grown a bit, Tim. We employ around 20,000 people in 51 countries and have a multi-billion-dollar revenue derived from outsourcing drug development and commercial services, and also by partnering and investing with our customers. That's a little bit of background, but the important point I want to make is that Quintiles grew entirely, as Tim introduced, from my own and Gary Cook's academic positions in biostatistics, and has become a mover and shaker in the pharmaceutical sector. Now, another example from myself just down the road in North Carolina is the corporate growth and influence from academic statisticians is Jim Goodnight and his partner John Saul's hugely successful company, SAS. Jim and John were professors of statistics at North Carolina State University, which is also just down the road from Chapel Hill, and founded SAS as a result. SAS has had an enormous influence on making complex statistical methodology available to many users in business, science, and government. And in particular, the SAS algorithms have also had substantial impact on the applications of biostatistics to clinical trials, as almost the entire pharmaceutical sector relies on the SAS system for carrying out data analysis. Now, the demanding regulatory environment regarding clinical trials and their statistical analysis in the pharmaceutical industry, particularly in the United States, but obviously also in Europe and all over the world, has had a major impact on the profession of biostatistics and the demand for biostatisticians. This impact includes the methodologies that get attention and funding, the details of good practices when applying biostatistical methods, the validity and reliability of the data analyzed, the validity of the software used, and the journals in which these and related professional topics get published. Standards for data analysis in clinical trials have been established in considerable detail by the FDA. And it was during the 1980s and early 90s that notable progress was made generating and implementing these standards. And I think myself and Gary Cook, among many others, and I'm sure members of the audience, had a considerable influence on those endeavors. And it certainly led me to turn much of my attention to forming quintiles. In turn, ground rules for consistency of methods and procedures followed, and these far exceeded, and still do, the demands that eminent statistical and medical journals place on papers submitted for publication. And I say that truly because I also ran the statistical consulting on the whole medical campus at Chapel Hill, and I think there was a perception that the standards there were higher than in the pharmaceutical industry. And I would guarantee that is not true. This is perhaps contrary to a general and incorrect perception that academic statistical work is of an inherently higher quality than comparable work in the corporate sector. The regulatory standards have, in our opinion and of others, led to a continued increase in the overall quality of statistical work in the medical field. They have also led to sustained and continued increases in demand for biostatisticians, particularly over the last 20 years. University departments of biostatistics have grown steadily since the 1960s, and the demand for biostatisticians continues to exceed supply, and that trend may be increasing. The tendency to recruit statisticians from mathematical graduates is, in my opinion, a root cause of marginalizing the field of statistics. The trend of selecting statisticians from mathematicians accompanied the development of the rigorous mathematical basis for much of modern-day statistics that took place during the middle of the 20th century. At that time, the computing capabilities to enable the application of mathematically complex statistical methodology was still not fully developed. And I was trained during the 60s, and Tim was too, and they were difficult times to actually do anything. You had to write all your own programs. Or certainly they were not easily available. And so there was a large gap between rigorous statistical theory and real applications to numerical data. During the 1970s, though, this gap started closing as computing capabilities multiplied. On the heels of this, sophisticated statistical computing packages, such as SAS, which I've referred to, moved into widespread use. As a result, complex statistical methodology became relatively easy to apply without in-depth knowledge of the mathematical derivation of those methods. Unfortunately, Mainstream academic statistics did not adapt to the opportunity as a whole, obviously many individual exceptions, namely, broaden the base of student appeal, broaden the field of statistics to information science, and emphasize data analysis and practice rather than theory. An argument, and I heard this among many eminent professors when I was in Chapel Hill very, very frequently, that was voiced to defend the mathematical approach, was that statistical practitioners would not apply methods appropriately if they did not fully understand the underlying theory. I believe this argument is self-serving to the mathematical status quo and also not true. One can use computers, drive cars, and take advantage of all manner of technical equipment without being an expert in the underlying technology. It is critical, though, to be well trained in the assumptions that specific statistical methodologies make, and also to understand strength of evidence provided by different study designs or data collection techniques. However, these requirements are much different from being able to derive the mathematics. Not only are they different, they rely on different underlying human skills and attributes. Moreover, the skill of mathematics has not, in our experience, carried over well into the skills needed to be a first-rate statistical consultant, teacher, or communicator. The huge expansion of the internet and ability to access data of all kinds since the early 1990s gave statistics an additional opportunity to broaden its base to become a value-added information science, and in turn, a field with greater influence on society at large. Business schools, from my vantage point, did adapt to prevailing trends, and so are having a major impact on capital markets, management practices, and business as a whole through the graduates they produce and place in key jobs, getting the ear of key decision makers and becoming key decision makers. Leading business schools have also maintained very high academic standards with enormously competitive entry requirements. Try to get into the Stanford Business School. The field of biostatistics, although a subspecialty within statistics, has also broadened its base of students and faculty. Mathematical requirements for entry to biostatistics programs have been relaxed. Many more females enter the field of biostatistics than statistics as a whole. This, in turn, has created a discipline with considerable influence in medicine and pharmaceuticals. This influence could be even greater if there was increased awareness of biostatistics or bioinformatics among students at an earlier age. The supply of biostatisticians is much smaller than demand, and this negative trend appears to be increasing, as I said earlier. Demetz and co-authors discuss this in depth for the United States and suggest that the situation is likely to be similar worldwide. Last night, I was discussing at dinner how wonderful it would be if there was a Department of Biostatistics, say at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, with 40 faculty. It would put Britain on the map in that regard. Zelen argues that biostatistics needs to change more rapidly through expanded training in bioinformatics, biology and genetics, less emphasis on mathematical statistics, and much more attention to data analysis. And that was a paper he wrote in 2006. In addition, Demetz argues for communication, management and leadership skills to be added to biostatistical training. And I think one can also read statistical in general training to that. The authors report on the conclusions of major workshops held in the United States and provide details of suggested curriculum change. Zelen also proposes that statistical science should play a greater role in policy issues, and we heard that this afternoon, particularly as many policy issues are based on quantitative information. Andy and I strongly concur with Zelen's view and with the conclusion of Demet's. More strongly, though, these comments are really not limited to biostatistics. Their general tone applies to the entire field of statistics, and I think importantly deserves far more serious attention by the academic community than is currently paid. Now, statistics in schools. Schools are fundamentally the starting point for the supply chain of our professional people, and in particular statisticians. Schools are tasked with providing all children with basic mathematical skills to fulfill the objective of developing numerate citizens. In this regard, they provide both the foundations and the building blocks to take students to more advanced levels of numeracy. However, fewer and fewer students have appeared willing to add blocks voluntarily, and the Roberts report highlighted a drop of 9% in numbers taking A-level mathematics in England during the 1990s, at a time when the demand for mathematically oriented graduates was increasing. Furthermore, it was reported that less than 10% of students in England continue with mathematics post the age of 16, and less than 10% of these go on to study for a mathematics degree. Now, Adrian Smith's specific follow-on post-14 mathematics inquiry subsequently confirmed the more generic issues raised by Roberts and found three main areas of concern. First, that the curriculum and qualification framework did not meet the requirements of learners, higher education, and employers. And as a major employer, I can certainly vouch for that. Second, that there was a serious shortage of mathematics teachers. And third, a lack of support infrastructure to provide continuing professional development for teachers. Specific pointers relating to statistics were controversial, however, with statistics and data handling occupying around 25% of the current GCSE mathematics curriculum. The issue was raised as to whether these should be removed to enable a greater focus on core mathematics in an already overcrowded curriculum. The suggestion was that statistics and data handling should be taught within other disciplines, such as biology or geography, with the longer-term aim that statistics might actually become embedded within these disciplines, since there was recognition that statistics and data handling were vital both within other academic disciplines and in the workplace. Now, although basic probability was regarded as part of core mathematics teaching, an obvious concern with such an approach was the fragmentation of statistics teaching and the potential impact on teaching quality. However, perhaps this is exactly the sort of challenge that our profession needs in the new millennium. Statistics is very much a contextual discipline, and student enthusiasm is generated through solving real problems. It is about discovery at an age when discovery is the overriding theme. The attractiveness of biostatistics is not unrelated to the fact that it is taught within context. Furthermore, the relative ease with which data can be presented graphically using computer software provides a link to the highly popular school subject, information technology, which can be used to enhance the teaching of statistics. There would, of course, be risks in removing statistics and data handling from mathematics, but also opportunities to redefine the subject in a broader fashion that distinguishes itself from mathematics through the study of variability. Implementation would require considerable energy and planning, but it could also be the springboard to relaunch the discipline in the UK by influencing children's perceptions of statistics at an early age. It would surely take coordination, a commitment by teachers, and the development of discipline-specific materials, including computer software. But the knock-on effect higher up the supply chain could be substantial. There is a concept that statistical societies, this is a concept that statistical societies such as the Royal Statistical Society, in my opinion, should embrace. Now let's have a look a little bit on the supply of statisticians, and this is very intermixed with what sort of statistician you want to supply. But nevertheless, I think there's a basic lack of supply in the first place. Now, we were planning to present data regarding the supply of degreed statisticians on a global basis, but at least not easily able to locate comparable data that we felt comfortable with. However, the following table that I'll show now regarding membership in national statistics societies will help provide a suitable proxy measure. The American Statistical Association has the largest membership, and the Royal Statistical Society the largest membership in Europe. Both the US and the UK have shown historical leadership in statistics, and the data supports the view that these countries continue to have an engaged group of statisticians. Interestingly, the American Statistical Association membership is similar to the combined membership of the European National Statistical Societies. However, data are limited, such as the data for India and China. We estimate that each year India produces around 400 to 500 statistics master's graduates, which is more than the 335 produced by the UK in 2005. While it is reported that there are over 100,000 official statisticians in China. The corresponding National Statistical Society memberships in these two large countries is clearly therefore unrepresentative of the true supply. The United States data suggests that there were 34,500 degreed statisticians in the United States in the mid-1990s. And this has most likely increased over the last decade. A very useful PhD thesis in statistics would be to build a comprehensive human resource supply-demand model for statisticians, perhaps with additional talents such as communication, with biostatisticians as a subgroup. Basic knowledge about the statistical labor force, its qualifications, and the future trends are not available, and so this makes it difficult to develop detailed plans for the evolution of our profession. This should be a priority for the statistics profession, whose business must be counting. If statisticians are in short supply and in high demand, then basic economics suggests that rewards, namely salaries, will be on the rise. And a statistical qualification will demand a premium. So let's consider rewards. I had a lot of US data, but Andy got some UK data. In the UK, the data show that 6 months after graduating, both statistics bachelors and master's graduates are receiving a salary premium of around 10% when compared to graduates in general. Furthermore, there are rewards associated with a statistics master's degree, almost 35% compared with a statistics bachelor's degree. And I would go on to say in biostatistics, certainly I need a certain number of PhDs because the PhD qualification tends to enable them to be more recognized and have greater clout. I think that's unfortunate, but it does speak to the need for high qualifications in our profession. Statistics graduates' salaries do not necessarily equate to salaries for statisticians, although most master's graduates will be employed as statisticians in some capacity. But nevertheless, these data should be used to promote statistics careers to students in both schools and colleges. Now, for the US, DeMetz presents the American Statistical Association annual survey data and describes how market forces have driven starting salaries up dramatically over the period 1995 to 2005. The recent popularity of business school degrees in the United States and Europe has had much to do with the salary premiums associated with such degrees. Indeed, evidence suggests that the business degree has now become so popular with students that premiums for the lesser qualified or from the lesser business schools are now reducing as the supply increases. We need more data in this area for statistics, and much more needs to be done in terms of promoting the economic rewards. Okay, that's some background. Moving and shaking. Recently, my wife and I have made a substantial donation to the School of Public Health at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And one of the goals of this donation is to increase the investment in research and training for new and improved biostatistical methodologies to speed clinical trials innovations and indeed possibly reinvent clinical trials using adaptive approaches and other innovative methods. And the pharmaceutical sector is crying out for this, and it would be hugely valuable and also to society. This echoes the suggestion of DeMetz that corporate donations are urgently required if biostatistics training is to be enhanced with additional skills and the number of graduates increased to meet demand. That leads to a general issue where the United Kingdom seriously lags the United States, namely donations to academic programs. The culture of giving and relying less on government is pervasive in the United States. In the United Kingdom, that same culture is beginning to take hold, but not at the rate required to close the gap, and I think move many of our programs. Academic programs must be well funded if they are to be leading programs on a worldwide stage. This applies generally to universities and particularly to statistics departments. In the statistical sciences, it means that academics and their university administrators must make a major effort to raise money from donors. And I've recently been appointed Pro-Chancellor of Southampton University, and I'm using that as a platform for this message. There is a powerful side effect that accompanies a focus on donations. Donors push for specific goals to be attained. So one can't altogether hide them, and donors tend to be fairly powerful people. This creates a force that makes academic programs more relevant to the needs of society. Statistics is urgently in the need of such a persuasive force. The original leadership provided by United Kingdom statisticians in developing the theoretical basis for statistics during the middle third of the 20th century is not being replenished with new and creative leadership for the needs of today within the UK. Similar concerns have been reported in Australia and India. In the UK, women are underrepresented in academia, and too few doctorates are being produced to meet academic demand, let alone the increased demand from industry. Instead, there is a complacency to continue along the same path, which is not furthering the role of statistics in society, but instead narrowing the field to greater obscurity. The new path is to recognize the greater role that statistics should play in our society. Evidence-based reasoning is sadly lacking in much of the media and in arguments presented by many politicians. Product marketing often drives emotion to win easily over evidence-based reasoning. The spin factor has become all persuasive. Darrell Huff's famous book, How to Lie with Statistics, is entertaining in its approach to identifying common statistical misrepresentations. However, the problem is far deeper than one of statistical misrepresentations. It is one of a severe lack of value placed by so many people on the merits of evidence-based reasoning. The roots of evidence-based reasoning lie in data, their presentation, and their analysis. And perhaps one of the most famous ladies ever of Britain, Florence Nightingale, gave statistics a lofty destiny. To understand God's thoughts, we must study statistics, for these are the measure of his purpose. A book by Steve Campbell, Statistics You Can't Trust, opens with a quote by H.G. Wells. Statistical thinking will one day be as necessary for efficient citizenship as the ability to read and write. It is sad, I think, that we have taken a backward step on H.G. Wells's path towards efficient citizenship during the second half of the 20th century, and that trend seems even more prolific now. This backward step has occurred when available data and the internet so proliferate our lives, probably in ways never imagined by Nightingale, Wells, and many others. This backward step has also marched in tandem, chronologically, with the increased mathematical specialization in the field of statistics. It would be erroneous reasoning, be it inductive or deductive, to necessarily claim a link. But it is appropriate to point out that there is a correlation, and it is also possible for cause and effect to be present. However, it is much easier to be critical of circumstances than it is to provide solutions, particularly solutions that gain support, lead to actions, which in turn are accomplished and generate the changes or outcomes required. And I would be the first to say that this presentation so far falls in the category of comment without a clear path to solution. I'll try to do a little to get to a solution. The first problem that arises as one moves towards providing solutions is to get support for the proposition that there is a fundamental problem with the profession of statistics in the first place. The solution must be to a real problem. And to some extent, that is why I'm here making this presentation. I am marketing the idea, but without, I hope, excessive spin, that the profession of statistics has failed its purpose and destiny to improve the numeracy of society, to increase the supply and demand for evidence-based reasoning, and to play a larger policy role at local, national, and international levels in also decision-making. I urge our profession at large to lobby at all levels in every way possible to exalt the merits of sound data and sound conclusions. The risk of ignoring this is to proceed along our current trajectory of less influence. Society would be well served if we had more influence on numeracy, evidence-based reasoning, and policy. An important task for statisticians to achieve if our profession is to increase its influence is the improvement of the image of statisticians. It is not an image that is always attractive to our best young people. I remarked on this at the joint statistical meetings in 2000 and illustrated with the quote that continues to make me cringe, but sometimes strikes a chord. A statistician is someone who is good at figures but does not have the personality to be an accountant. Now, our image is linked with the issues we have discussed of excessive mathematical emphasis and a narrow base of student applicants. There is great opportunity to improve our image if we reduce the nerd factor and broaden the base. Communication is also critical if we are to achieve an image makeover. Poor communication starts right in the classroom. Many statistical lectures or presentations are difficult to understand and put into context. I return again to a quote I gave at the joint statistical meetings in 2000 from Enrico Fermi, the famous physicist, about a statistics lecture he attended. Before I came here, I was confused about this subject. Having listened to your lecture, I am still confused, but on a higher level. Okay, let me try to wrap up and put a few things together in as succinct a way as I'm able. 3 basic goals of statistics really have been discussed in this presentation. First, to improve the numeracy of society. Second, to increase the supply of and demand for evidence-based reasoning. And third, to increase the role of statisticians in policy at local, national, and international levels. For each of these goals, I think there is a core strategy around which a more detailed, action-oriented program can be developed and implemented. Let us start with the numeracy goal. The core strategy here must be to improve the teaching of mathematics and statistics in schools. The appeal of statistics to students must be improved, and computers and graphics would seem the fundamental way to achieve this. Teaching statistics within a contextual framework would also help. Now, the second goal of improving evidence-based reasoning is likely to benefit from broadening statistics programs in higher education. This must be through reducing mathematical content and elevating other skills such as communication and leadership. Much more data analysis, including case studies in degree programs, following the example of some business schools, would be the principal objective. At the same time, more high-scoring students outside of mathematics should be admitted to statistics programs to broaden the base of graduates. All major statistics departments should move to change their name, if they qualify, to the Department of Information Science. Goal number 3 of increasing the role of statistics in policy would tend to follow from the first 2 core strategies of more appealing mathematics and statistics in schools and less mathematics in statistics programs in higher education. However, some turbocharging is also needed, and this should come from broadening the skills of academic faculty through encouraging and expecting consulting to cement more linkages with industry and with governments. A greater focus on fundraising by faculty would be beneficial, and this should be led by university administrators. In addition, journals should examine their publication policy, and this venerable organization, the Royal Statistical Society, should market itself aggressively, which I'm delighted to say is happening. Tim just showed me significance, and I thought that was fabulous. And I think one should consider changing the name of the Royal Statistical Society for the Institute for Evidence-Based Reasoning. Over the next decade, statisticians will gain much greater influence and prestige if plans along these lines are debated and implemented. A senior task force appointed by a newly named Institute for Evidence-Based Reasoning should be set up immediately to accomplish this. We look forward to hearing reactions from our discussants. And thank you. I've very much appreciate this audience, and I really enjoyed putting this talk together. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tim, and thank you, Dennis, for giving me the opportunity to get involved with such an interesting paper. I was asked some time ago now by Andy if I would be a discussant for this paper, given my role as the PSI chair, the Society of Statisticians in the Pharmaceutical Industry. And on agreeing, I thought that probably the role of the discussant was to try and be as controversial as possible. However, when I received the paper a couple of weeks ago, I realized that that might be a bit more of a challenge than I expected, given that I did agree with much of what was being said. So I'll start off trying to pick out some of the specific points that, Dennis, you raised, and try and develop them a little bit and give what I believe are my reasons for why they might be the case, and then go on to try and disagree a little bit with some of the points you make. I just need to find my slides first. Okay, so the first quote from Dennis that I'd like to highlight now, and that's all about the image that we have as statisticians. And Dennis mentioned that an important task for us to achieve if our profession is to increase its influence is the improvement of the image of a statistician. This isn't new. Certainly in PSI at the annual conference last year, Kevin Carroll, the chief statistician from AstraZeneca, also raised this point, and this is the slide he put up then that did cause some amusement in the audience. And he first of all quoted Stephen Sen, who rather tongue-in-cheek, I think, said that the statistician is one who has neither the intellect for maths nor the commitment to medicine, but likes to dabble in both. And like the quotes about accountants, I think they're really rather tongue-in-cheek. However, Kevin then went on to say that actually statisticians are really well placed to make a telling contribution to guide business decisions. We, more than anybody else, understand the data, its value and its limitations. So we are really in a very powerful position. So why is it that sometimes we don't make as much impact as we would like to? I think the reason is this next one that Dennis mentioned, and it's this, that the skill of mathematics has not necessarily carried over well into the skills needed to be a first-rate statistical consultant or teacher. And I'd really like to develop why I think that might be the case. Certainly at GSK, where I work, when I became a new manager a few years ago, I was sent on a management training course, which was delightful. And one of the things that we had to do was a Myers-Briggs questionnaire. Perhaps we could have a quick show of hands of who's had the pleasure of filling one of those questionnaires in. Fantastic, and I'm sure you all enjoyed it as much as I did. And I came back from the course having discovered all about Myers-Briggs, and my department's head rushed in and said to me, "What did you get on the Myers-Briggs?" And I said, I'm an ISTJ. And he looked so crestfallen. And of a department with, I think, 9 managers, plus him as the department head, so 10 of us, 8 were ISTJs, and only 2 were, I think, ESTJs. And I don't think that's a random chance. I don't think it's a fluke. I think it really summarises the skills and what statisticians are like. And I looked up Myers-Briggs on this website that you can see here. And the description it gave of ISTJs, which I for introverted, and I think the first category, well, is either introverted or extroverted. And you all, I think, know the other categories given you've done the questionnaire. But the description of an ISTJ that this website gave is that they direct their energy towards the inner world of ideas and information. They try to clarify concepts, seeking to have as clear a knowledge as possible. They often place a lot of trust in experience, but also envisage future goals, providing there is a clear pathway to that goal. And a lot of those qualities, you think, that's great, you know, I want to employ people as statisticians with those skills. The challenge, I think, is with that first small letter I, introverted. And here, I think, is a fundamental paradox. Statistics isn't a science in itself. It needs to go with something. It needs to work in partnership with other disciplines. We're working with data in order to achieve the goals. Working with other people means collaboration, means communication. If we're introverted, that doesn't sit naturally with us. So what should we do? Should we screen school children to make sure we recruit and provide bursaries to some of those extroverted people? Well, I think not. I think that a lot of the skills that ISTJs, and probably most of you therefore, have are skills that are essential to a statistician. But if you look at this website that I looked at for Myers-Briggs, it was very useful because it gave a description of some of the, well, in my company we're not allowed to call them weaknesses, we're supposed to call them areas for development. But it looked at some of these areas for development and says, okay, if you're an ISTJ, what is it that you need to work on to really raise your game? And you can see the points here. That you need to, we need to work better at articulating our views. We need to develop a long-term vision that avoids focusing too much on detail. We need to develop a greater understanding of how people feel, changing things on an experimental basis to see if they can be improved, and learning to promote our own ideas and achievements, recognizing that actually others may well find them valuable. And this is all around communication skills, leadership skills, management skills. This is really where I think many statisticians, myself included, aren't naturals, and this is what we really need. Another quote from Dennis. So Demetz's paper in 2006 argues for communication, management and leadership skills to be added to biostatistical training. And I think if we think about Myers-Briggs and what I've just showed you there, if you can agree with my suggestion that many of us are actually ISTJs, then it provides some strong rationale about why those areas really do need to be added to our university courses. In addition, some other interesting information that you might find curious. PSI sponsors, as part of our work with careers, a top trumps card in schools. School children have these careers top trump cards. And you can see here that for a statistician, okay, numeracy is ranked the highest it can be at a 10, but ranked a close second is communication skills. So it really is critical. So moving now to Dennis's conclusions or his goals, and to try and agree and potentially disagree with one or two of his conclusions. So goal 1, improving the numeracy of society. So Dennis's suggestion is that we need to improve the teaching of statistics in schools and also in university undergraduate courses. And we can do this by teaching within the contextual framework. And I think this is absolutely critical. People don't understand what statisticians do. If I go to a dinner party and tell them what I do, they walk away quickly. They don't understand what we do, and they don't understand why it's important. If we start teaching it in a contextual framework in schools, a lot more people will be far more receptive to the role that statistics can play and how important it is, and also why it's needed. Children like games. I recently had to do some filming for the National Geographic TV channel about how statistics can help you win at all sorts of different games of chance. And one of those was Monopoly. Simple examples like that of how you can use probability in statistics to improve your chances of winning something like that will get school children's attention in 2 seconds. And so I believe that statistics should be included in the syllabus for most subjects at school, and that will help aid the general numeracy and also understanding and appreciation of statistics in society. But I do believe that statistical theory does still need to be taught within the maths or statistics subject syllabus, and I'll go on to explain why in a moment. Goal 2 that Dennis proposed is to increase the supply and demand for evidence-based reasoning. One suggestion he made was to elevate other skills such as communication, and I think I've made clear that I certainly very strongly agree with that proposal. Another suggestion was to reduce the maths content, which I struggled with rather more. Certainly in the world of pharmaceutical statistics, I see on a yearly basis that there's an increasing demand on us to be more technical as the regulations for drug approval increase, as cost becomes more of a factor. There is more and more pressure being placed upon us to do more clever study designs, quicker study designs, get rid of useless drugs more quickly, be more innovative, and things like adaptive designs, Bayesian statistics are very sexy in the pharmaceutical world at the moment, and there is just an increasing need for us to be more technical. Likewise, PhDs, because of that, are becoming increasingly attractive in our industry. And so I think that we can't really reduce the maths content, but we do need to introduce some of these other skills like communication and leadership training. Goal 3 is to increase the role of statisticians. And it's a yes and a yes to this from me. I think we need more appealing statistics education in school, and I think we need more well-rounded statisticians leaving university. And like Dennis says, in the meantime, this does all take time. We do need some turbocharging. And firstly, I think we do need an image makeover. And not by inviting Trini and Susanna to the RSS Council meeting next time, but by some of these other suggestions, by broadening the skills of academic and professional statisticians, really working on our communication, leadership and management skills, and also increasing the influence of the statistical societies. I've been particularly impressed. I joined the RSS Council a year ago, and I've been particularly impressed with the RSS interactions with government in the last 12 to 18 months regarding the changes in UK statistical legislation. And really, actually, the RSS has been incredibly influential with that, or so we think. Likewise, the first time in Man Working Party report that the RSS commissioned fairly recently. Again, when the Working Party finalised their recommendations, the RSS ensured that these had a reasonably high profile in the press, and I think we in the statistical societies have a responsibility to push ourselves. One of the things that ISTJs probably aren't very good at, and really make sure that we're more influential so that people understand how important we are. Likewise, within PSI, we've just announced a couple of months ago our 3-year business plan, and our top priority is to increase the influence within European drug regulatory bodies regarding the recruitment and the role of statisticians. I think the MHRA in the UK, after a number of years of lobbying in the 90s, finally convinced, a few nods from people who were very involved with that, the MHRA to recruit statisticians. The other European regulatory bodies are far less well, there's a lot that still don't recruit them, and so that's our top objective, to try and influence that. And again, there's obviously other statistical societies, and we should be pushing ourselves. We all have a responsibility. So coming to a close, what's in a name? Statistics, or should we call ourselves information science? And should the RSS change its name to the Institute for Evidence-Based Reasoning? Well, I say no, let's keep to statistics. I tried out the name information science with a couple of friends, and they looked rather blank. No less blank than when I talk about statistics. But let's be proud of statistics, and let's market ourselves better. And yes, to an RSS senior task force to implement change. And very finally, I did enjoy one statement in Dennis's paper. I'm not sure the majority of the audience will appreciate it as much as I did. But many more females enter the field of biostats than stats as a whole. And this in turn has created a discipline with considerable influence in medicine and pharmaceuticals.
Okay. I, like Sarah, was asked to be a discussant here and know that read papers, you're supposed to take opposite views and things. And I too could almost say exactly the same thing. I agree with the majority of stuff in the paper because working for an organisation with 600 staff, ISD, or my name badge stands for Information Services Division of the NHS in Scotland. It used to be Information and Statistics Division, but over the last 15 years, our experience has grown greatly, and we now have as many information management and IT professionals, as well as medics and pharmacy people, than we actually have on the analysts. There's maybe about 250 of those, and maybe only half of them would actually recognise that they're statisticians. So, our statisticians where added value was the original title. It then fortunately changed to information science, shake, rattle and time to roll. And when I saw the goals, I thought, I've worked for over 20 years in the health service in the UK, public service, official statistics. This is what we're all about. There's nothing new there. We've been trying to do that, and I thought, what has been preventing us from achieving these goals? And I thought, role, got into a bit of wordplay on those of us from the west and the north. Think of about a bacon butty in Scotland. That's what gives us all the problems we have on our health. It's pretty stodgy. And I thought, well, that's maybe what a lot of people's perception about the profession of statisticians is. Stodge, very stodgy. A lot of these points I've added to this slide all the way over the last 2 days. Some of the authors of the statements can actually see them and put them together. That, if you were doing a SWOT analysis, would say these are the weaknesses of the profession. I think the scepticism came out a lot this morning. Scots lead the world on that. You've all referred to Gordon Brown as the doer Scotsman there. Something to do with a lack of sunshine and rain, although I think England's getting its fair share of that this summer as well. We're good at being self-deprecating, and we've also just really now focusing in the health service about well-being and happiness indexes, just to try and turn around our perceptions. And that's maybe something I think that I would like to see about the image of statistics doing as well. My second degree is in management science. I'm one of those MBAs. And, you know, I think I've gone to some of the techniques that we have in management science. It actually follows beautifully on from the stuff that Sarah said with Myers-Briggs. There's a company in Scotland called Insight who've taken Myers-Briggs and put it into this format of colours, and they're much more easy to remember than INTJ. And I apologise to those of you who, 10% of the men who are colourblind and can't really get the difference between the blue in the top left-hand corner, the red in the top right. But starting in the top left, it actually describes the people in that box, and there's probably a lot of the introverts there, the numerate people, thinkers, judgmental possibly as well, cautious, precise, deliberate, questioning, formal. that sound a bit like some of the academic statisticians we might know? Over in the red box, you get competitive, demanding, determined, strong-willed and purposeful people. These tend to be the macho managers. I don't think we've got too many of those within the profession, but they're certainly there that make things happen. The green box are the caring, encouraging, sharing, patient, relaxed people. Now, this is something that tends to be the caring professions, nurses, teachers. Women tend to be in that box as well, and that might tie in with where some of the issues are on the academic side. And then we've got the yellow people, and I'm one of those. Sociable, dynamic, demonstrative, enthusiastic, persuasive. There's another slide with the faults as well, but we won't go into, I haven't time for that. And an organisation needs a balance. Now, that was a 4-way categorisation, like any colour wheel, whether we've got Trini and Susanna here looking at the image that we should have, there's the overlaps. And, you know, a blue-red person is someone that tries to lead. The leadership style is to succeed and develops the beliefs of excellence, which is something that is very firmly in the academic area. And then if you move it on to, where did I go the wrong way there? Gone too far. I missed, slide has gone. Well, it might have reappeared. The leadership style of inspiring and motivating others is the one that actually we really need to have. You've got to have a vision of where you're going and be creative in your leadership. And I think that's maybe something that within statistics, when maybe somebody said to me earlier, since Klaus Moser was around, we've really been lacking that. So I think we need to do more in developing that and taking it forward. Certainly, actually I think we need to, if we start rolling and moving away from a BAP, trying to think of a snowball increasing and rolling downhill, because we're going to get up ahead of steam here. We're not going to be self-deprecating all the time. We need to create this positive professional image. Harvard Business School, pulling back that management speak again, have it as defined up there. And there's a whole world of management science around it with words like positive distinctiveness, social recategorization. Hey, management science is much worse than statistics at inventing new words and things. But it's about how we as a profession behave. To be valued, we've got to educate others on the positive things we can do. Maybe we focus too much on the negatives and incorporate our statistical training experience into the workplace within the context that we're working in. On a negative side, though, which is the social recategorization stuff, you can often sometimes, if you don't put your head above the parapet, suppress your own identity. You go with the flow and you conform with the dominant culture. And in some ways, in my own recent experience, sometimes that comes that you think, particularly in official statistics, civil service, you go with serving ministers by telling them what you feel policy colleagues want the ministers to hear, and not actually what you feel the integrity is there to do. And that comes on to the point about needing shared values and ethics. These need to be visionary, not task-focused, which takes us back to some of the discussions we had earlier about why we need a new code, a professional code of conduct. And then we've also got to build credibility and maintain authenticity in what we're doing. That comes to things like stop running down the profession and get involved in the target setting, as we heard earlier today. I think Sara covered a lot about our need to improve numeracy, and it's not just within the UK. I think if you look at we've always had a holy grail looking for statistical nous. Somebody that can do a competency assessment that describes and can get me staff recruited with statistical nous would be really valuable. We have analytical services divisions there which bring together all the functions that we have within the public sector working together. We've got to do more team working, I spent a lot of time over the last 5 years working on the professions within the health service and trying to get a new pay scheme in there. That all the pay schemes are now competency-based, not just on the functional competencies, but with the generic civil service ones as well, which come into this work we've done in the Professional Affairs Committee on continuous professional development, going beyond the functions of statistics, bringing in communications, context, people, project change management, and influencing skills. So all in all, I agree that we cannot change to the only thing I disagree with is Institute for Evidence-Based Reasoning. Doesn't work. I also remember changing the Royal Charter and how long that will take. I think maybe we could incorporate to an Institute of Statistics in Society. And for philanthropy, well, Tom Hunter is following in Andrew Carnegie's steps just now of announcing £1 billion to be gifted. Maybe we should make a grab for some of that money.
Thank you, Mary.